Hey, what's going on, YouTube? So Jordan Peterson recently uploaded his lecture where he addresses the question regarding whether or not he believes in God. Now, Jordan Peterson has been interesting to watch because those of us who have been following his career for a couple years now, we remember when in the beginning he was just this Canadian psychology professor in his suspenders outside debating with college kids about pronouns and things like that. And now he's this world-renowned best-selling author. He has millions of subscribers on YouTube. He said in his video that he's traveled to well over 100 cities, talking to hundreds of thousands of people. So it's been interesting to watch Jordan Peterson over the past couple of years. But because he's somebody who so many people consider to be this intellectual, this mentor, this person that they look to for guidance regarding life, hence his best-selling book, 12 Rules for Life. Obviously, that being the case, they're going to want to know his perspective on the most important question of all. Do you believe in God? Does God exist? What happens when we die? What's our purpose in life? And he's been able to, for so long, avoid answering this question. So I guess this lecture was his answer. But it wasn't much of an answer. I mean, I feel like I understand whether or not he believes in God at this point, or at least I feel like I figured out the truth regarding how he feels about it, even though he didn't really answer the question. So let me look at my notes. I took a couple of notes because it took him an hour, to actually address the question. I think it was like an hour and 6 minutes in when he finally said, so people ask me whether or not I believe in God. So, Jordan Peterson, I think one of the main reasons he's such a prominent figure is due to his rhetoric, due to his ability to speak with such eloquence so clearly. I think that is really what he has mastered. At the end of the day, although he is a clinical psychologist and a professor, and he does have a lot of knowledge regarding that subject, at the end of the day, the more I think about it and the more I look at his lectures and his work, he really just seems like a motivational speaker. And I think he gets so much hype because of those credentials that he has, and people perhaps think that he's a bit smarter than he actually is just because he's such a good speaker. But if you look at his work, his 12 rules for life, they're things like clean up your room, don't lie, stand up straight. So anyways, I'm rambling a bit, but let's get to it. So finally, an hour in, he goes, okay, people ask me this question, and he says he doesn't like this question. And then he had three hypotheses as to why. He's trying to think, well, I don't like this question, but why don't I like this question? So he says the first hypothesis was that it's none of your business, right? Which, fair enough. When you're a public figure, obviously, there are going to be certain things that you don't want to be asked about, that you feel it's none of people's business. However, if he's going to be telling people 12 rules for life as if he's, Moses with the 10 Commandments, I think it's a fair enough question for him to address that, But I think as he said maybe it's a cop-out. I think that's what it is, because he doesn't really want to deal with this question. So then number two, he said, well, what's meant by believe? Right? So now he's, like I said, he's so good at speaking. He's really mastered the art of speech, vocabulary. So, well, what's meant by believe? Which also, it seems sort of like a cop-out, but it is a valid question. But it's like, all right, well, then why don't you answer the question and define believe for yourself? And this is where things start to become clearer to me, because he says, okay, well, if I say I believe, is it just about what you say or what you act out? Which is true, which I agree with. That you can say that you, for example, are a member of a particular religion, but if you don't follow that religion, then, sometimes your actions, as they say, actions speak louder than words. So he has a point there, but he still doesn't really say whether or not he believes in God. And then he gets to point number 3, hypothesis number 3, where he says, I'm afraid that he might exist. Yeah, he says that he's afraid that God might exist. And he said that that's the most comical, which makes it seem like, oh, well, he's about to write that off. But then he also says that he thinks it might be the most accurate. And I think that that is the most accurate. I think if you look at these answers, these hypotheses, I think that he's afraid that God might exist, meaning that if he does find that he believes God exists and that God is real, that he's going to have to live up to that belief. So that's what I think. I think Jordan Peterson, he is avoiding this question. He's avoiding dealing with it because if he acknowledges that he believes God exists, that means he's going to have to act upon that belief. And I don't think he wants to do that. I don't think he, for whatever reason, is ready or willing to say, you know what, I believe in God, therefore I'm going to live as if I believe in God, and I'm going to, search out the truth and search out his scriptures. Because, for example, let's say that he says, I believe in God, and he searches and he looks into the Quran, for example. Let's say he reads the Quran. I mean, he's reached a point of prominence to the extent that he can easily study Islam with brilliant scholars. He could sit with them and they could teach him the Quran and the belief of the Muslims. And what if he finds that, Islam is the truth? The Quran is actually from God. The Prophet Muhammad is actually a prophet of God. Then he would be forced to live up to that. He would have to become a Muslim. He would have to pray 5 times a day. He would have to join a religion that, perhaps he doesn't want to. Perhaps he's afraid of the backlash he would get. So that became apparent to me because, like I said, it took him an hour to even address this. And then he finally said these 3 points, and then he sort of rambled for another 45 minutes or whatever. But I think those hypotheses speak volumes. I think that's the reality of Jordan Peterson in relation to God. And I think I have some more notes here where I remember he said, he quoted Jesus, right? Because he seems to have knowledge of the Bible, but he's an intellectual in that he uses a lot of his own conjecture about things. So when he reads the Bible and he portrays stories of the Bible, he's not going off of some classical, scholarly understanding that Christians or Jews have passed down over the centuries, it seems. It seems like he just sort of uses his own brain to try to interpret these stories. And he quotes Jesus. There's this quote in the Bible where Jesus says something along the lines of, allegedly he says this, and but it is written in the Bible, don't call me good, only God is good, right? He said there's none good but God. And Jordan Peterson, in this speech, he was sort of implying that, even Jesus didn't answer this question. And I think that's absurd. I think a much more accurate interpretation of such a quote would be that obviously Jesus believes in God, but what he's saying is that he's not God, okay? And this, of course, is the Islamic understanding of Jesus, that Jesus was a prophet, just like Moses, just like Muhammad, just like Noah. These were all prophets, and they all worshiped God, and they all called to the worship of God. Whereas Jordan Peterson was acting as if, Jesus didn't answer the question, so I shouldn't have to answer the question. Who am I to answer the question if Jesus didn't? Like, as if Jesus didn't believe in God. That's the thing about Jordan Peterson. Like I said, he's brilliant at speaking. He's fun to listen to because he's so good at articulating, and that's why there have been so many viral videos where he sits with reporters and journalists who are also, they've also mastered rhetoric to an extent where they can sit with people and interview them and trap them and manipulate them But they haven't been able to do that to Jordan Peterson because he is better at it than they are. So that's why he's had all these moments where he's making, these journalists look foolish. But at the end of the day, I think if you cut through all of the rhetoric and all of his mastery of the English language, he just seems like a guy who is struggling with his own conjecture to figure things out. And obviously, when you turn away from God and you turn away from divine guidance, human beings are extremely limited. And I think you can obviously see his limitations when, his 12 rules for life, such a brilliant man, it's stuff like clean your room and stand up straight and be honest. And he struggles to even answer a question such as, do you believe in God? I mean, this is not very complicated stuff. So I think that's pretty much all that I wanted to say regarding my thoughts after watching his lecture. I think the reality is it's really not that difficult of a question. Do you believe in God or not? I mean, obviously your actions should coincide with your belief, and that's something that he pointed out. If you want to have be a person of integrity, then what you say should coincide with what you do. But it seems like a cop-out just because you don't want to necessarily live up to believing in God, that you just sort of try to avoid the question. And another thing is that he didn't say he doesn't believe in God, right? He didn't say God doesn't exist, because although he's trying to make it seem as if saying you believe in God is this huge statement, it's a much more arrogant statement to say that God doesn't exist, okay? So we also live in a time where it's not necessarily the most popular thing to believe in God. So I think there's a lot going on there. I don't want to ramble, but those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments. And what I wanted to say was, these questions about God and what he wants from us, and if he exists, what does that mean? Like, how do we act upon that? These are things that no matter how smart you might be or how smart you might think somebody is, God sent prophets. God has infinite knowledge, infinite wisdom. And unless God has revealed certain knowledge, answering the questions that have to do with the unseen, that have to do with things that only he knows, we sitting here, with our conjecture and trying to figure things out, we're not going to get there. So I think Jordan Peterson, he needs to sit with some Muslim scholars. He had Hayyan Hirsi Ali, I think her name was, on his channel, I remember, who is somebody who makes a career off of bashing Islam. I mean, he has all of the resources in the world at his fingertips to learn about Islam. But he hasn't. He's openly said that he's ignorant about Islam. I hope that God guides him, that he deals with this question. Particularly, he looks into the Quran. And that's all I have to say. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching.